Welcome to Life on Life's Terms, and this is your host, Chelsey. With me today, I have our guest, Angela, and we are going to be covering topics about the mental well-being with children and bullying. We are going to discuss a little bit about mindfulness with children and what it's like living with multiple sclerosis. So, Angela, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. I'm so happy you're here. I'm actually pretty excited because today is our 100th episode and my first time flying solo on the mic. So, how about we start with you telling a little bit about yourself?
I am a teacher of 20 years.
Wow.
Taught everything from kindergarten to grade 9. I have 2 small children at home, 1 and 3, and was recently, I guess, almost 2 years diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that for sure. I think first I kind of want to jump into what it's like being a teacher for you. Like, did you always want to be a teacher? When you're growing up, was that something you thought of, or did that happen later in life?
I think it happened later in life. I remember playing teacher as a child, but it wasn't my first choice moving into university.
Yeah.
I was in a few other fields before I decided to go into education.
When you were younger, what was your first idea of what you wanted to be?
Actually, I had pursued or had interest in pharmacology.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a big difference.
Yes.
Holy. I remember when I was growing up, I used to want to be a lawyer. And I used to tell my parents the reasoning was because I like to argue. And then that never happened. And it actually turned into, by the time I finished high school, wanting to be a writer. And then I guess the closest thing to that is writing blogs now, because I never did pursue that. But that was definitely one of my passions. So what exactly caused you to switch and go into teaching? Because that's such a drastic change, like what we said.
Actually, I felt that being in the sciences program was too much for me to handle. There was too many labs, too much science.
Right.
I wasn't that passionate enough to pursue it. And so I opted for education, actually, just from a suggestion my mom had made, because she said she noticed that I had a lot of admiration for my teachers growing up, and it seemed like something natural.
Oh, well, that's good. And you obviously love it. 20 years is a long time to be sticking with it. You must love it.
Absolutely.
Well, and I've witnessed you firsthand with your children and with mine, and you're definitely a natural. You can just see the big heart shining through. And I guess with that, I kind of want to jump into bullying, because that's obviously something you have probably seen a lot and often. Mm-hmm. And I read a crazy statistic just a couple of days ago, and it was, now I might get this a little wrong. I might have to correct myself in my blog, but I think it was over 3 million children between the age 10, or youth between the age 10 and 24 contemplate suicide every year. Over 3 million, which I thought was just a crazy high number. I did not expect that whatsoever. And of course, one of those contributing factors, there's lots. There's problems at home, and then there's all sorts of things, being introduced to drugs and alcohol. But bullying is a big one. Having low self-esteem in general is a big one.
Yes.
And I was a child care provider for years, so I got to experience it for a short time, and it is crazy. Little kids can be mean.
Absolutely.
Very mean. And you, being a teacher for 20 years, I can't imagine how many different times you've had to witness it and deal with it.
I've seen it, from time to time. I think it's oftentimes more prevalent now on digital devices, which is much more difficult to monitor at school. But
not so much in the playground anymore.
No, you don't see that. And that's usually pretty easy to deal with if it's, someone pushing someone. And again, we have to remember that bullying is behavior over a period of time. Someone pushing someone once, or someone calling someone a name, that's shouldn't be considered bullying because everything under the spectrum seems to be called bullying nowadays.
Yes, I agree.
But yeah, definitely it's way more difficult to monitor and manage with so many kids having their own phones and digital devices. And of course, it seems to be much worse in young girls who online bully all the time for everything. So.
Right, yeah. Yes, I know. Well, I'll ask you this. When you were younger, were you ever bullied?
I was old school bullied.
Old school, not cyber bullied,
not
right?
cyber bullied, but called names and picked on.
Yeah.
Hitting puberty and my body changing.
That's the rough age, right?
And boys calling you names. And, I talk about this with my own students and say like how, I don't know, apathetic the teacher was or just uncomfortable that the teacher was in the situation. They simply just didn't do anything, which was probably the worst thing. At least acknowledge it. You're not going to solve the problem likely the first time, but don't ignore what you're seeing or hearing among your students. And that's what happened. Yeah, for most of junior high, it was by far not my favorite period.
Junior high, I agree. That's the worst year. I don't know if that's just when all of us females become super, maybe I think all our insecurities start to come out. Absolutely. Well, that's what happened for me. I can't speak for everyone, but I was on both sides of the fence. I was bullied and I was the bullier. It was almost that mentality, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah.
And I remember this one time I went to the washroom in the middle of a class session and I could hear this girl crying in a bathroom stall, and it was one that she was new to the school, and me and the other mean girls, I guess we'll say, had been picking on her for probably about a week straight. And to the point we broke into her locker and we stole stuff out. We hung her extra pair of panties on her locker. We did mean things. Yeah. And I felt sick to my stomach every time I participated. But it was either that or have my locker broken into is the mentality I thought. Never once did I think to go to a teacher because then
you're a snitch.
Yeah, then right. And then what happens then? It just kind of seemed like a lose-lose situation. And but anyways, hearing this girl crying in the bathroom was what kind of did it for me. I couldn't handle it. My guilt took over, and I actually knocked on the door and called her out of the stall and gave her a hug, and we went to the principal's office together. But it shouldn't have to get to that point, right? It's just so unfortunate. I know even my sister, she had a really tough time in school to the point where she dropped out and she went through, what is it called? Oh my goodness.
Like distance learning or correspondence?
Yeah, kind of like that. Yes, okay. Yeah, with modules and whatnot, just not through high school and junior high. And sometimes, again, that's another situation where it shouldn't get that tough. You shouldn't dread going to school.
No.
And you shouldn't be scared to approach a teacher.
Absolutely.
So, how did you ever tell your parents when you were being bullied? What was their approach to it? Or how did they expect you to handle it? Because I know some are like, oh, just punch them in the face.
Yeah, no, I think it was simply just, ignore them, ignore them, right? Which
suck it up type thing. Yeah,
which really isn't an approach at all because it's, like you said, as a child or as a teen, you're struggling to find your identity. So if you stand up for yourself, you're going to lose what you think are your friends.
Right.
So you are in a really tough position, and simply ignoring them. No 12 or 13 or 14-year-old who I ever met has the confidence to simply stand up and walk away and feel secure that they will have friends down the road. So
right. Yeah.
I don't think it was handled. You just went through it. And as an adult, you realize that, maybe it made you stronger, right?
Yeah,
made you
more
resilient.
Yeah.
But of course, now when you move on and have your own children, you dread the thought of them ever having to face anything like that again, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine. It just breaks my heart thinking about it. Luckily, there's a few years until the teenage years come, but still just thinking about it, I don't even know. I'm not sure what I would say. If my daughter were to come home and say she was being bullied, I don't know. I would be so sad and angry. I bet you it'll be a mix of emotions. Probably go to the school. But then, I was saying, there's that approaching the teacher thing. and what mommy to the rescue.
Exactly. You want to teach your child how to handle it and manage it themselves, right? Of course, if there's a safety issue, an adult has to intervene. But yeah, you do want to just help nurture your child to have the skills, because you're going to face bullies as an adult.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
This is unfortunately the reality. So
yeah, that's life. I guess you have to prepare it sooner or later. And what about coping mechanisms that you offer to any students? Like, have you had students come to you personally, directly, and tell you about situations that are happening, or is it usually just word of mouth?
It's often word of mouth, or sometimes even it's through a student's writing that they don't directly tell you, but you can indirectly, read through the lines and see that bullying is happening. Maybe not even within their peer group, but even sometimes at home, right? Just the type of behaviors and language that they talk about is shared at home in their writing. And so if it's serious enough, we definitely will pull this child or teenager aside and talk to them, but they also have to be willing to talk to you too, right? Because there's a huge element of fear when you're being bullied, right? Who am I safe with? What's going to happen? What's going to be the outcomes, consequences? Am I going to be humiliated, mortified, right? So
absolutely. And so many negative possibilities, like the way trump over the positive outcomes, right? Like at that age, I guess at any age, people tend to think about the negative outcome. But when you're, say, 12 years old, you just have so many fears. And you're also so easily influenced, I believe, at that age, that if somebody calls you one name, that name is going to stick with you, like something negative, something mean, something that makes you feel low about yourself. You're just so easily impacted then, and it just makes coming forward that much scarier.
Absolutely.
Right? When you feel little and small, it's pretty hard to be brave.
Yeah.
So would you, let's say if there was something going on at home, what kind of information or support would you offer a teen?
Well, I know at our school now we do have a family liaison worker, which is similar to like a counselor, like what we had years ago. And oftentimes she will meet with them first. If parents need to be involved, she will contact them as well.
Right.
But everyone who is involved, whether they're the bully or the bystander, are often brought in together. We discuss what's causing the bullying, and how we can look at a plan going forward and how to eliminate it entirely, not even reduce it, eliminate it.
Yeah, exactly.
And fortunately for me, I've been in situations where that has been effective. But I know that there have been students similar to your sister who have unfortunately felt that they need to remove themselves from the school entirely because they can't get away from that peer group. But again, with social media now, you don't even have to be in the same building anymore, and the bullying can still continue.
Exactly. Right? It's so terrible, cyberbullying. You just can't escape it unless you want to completely shut off from the
social
internet.
Media,
but that's not very a common thing nowadays. So what about, do you guys have any sort of annual or monthly bullying, like for example, something in the gym for all the children? Like, do you guys discuss it? And do you think those are even effective? Speaking about it to a group?
From school to school, it really changes. Right?
Yeah.
The current place I'm at right now, we don't seem to have a huge issue with bullying or that has been brought forward. Right.
And sorry, are you teaching elementary or junior high?
I'm in junior high.
In junior high. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good sign.
Yeah. Hopefully it is. Right.
Yeah.
And people aren't just holding it in or avoiding telling us in general. But I know when I've been in other schools, we would have like a pep rally in the gym.
Right. Yeah.
And we would talk about it. Now, whether it's effective or not, I don't know, because the kids that take it are often the ones that understand the whole bullying. And much like you said, what they found with people who bully, they have often been bullied themselves.
Yeah.
And that's their coping way of handling it,
Yeah,
right? If you can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes we find that bullying stems from home, right? They're being bullied by a parent or maybe a sibling, an older sibling at home, and therefore they need to assert their authority in another way.
Right.
And they do it at school.
Try and feel big in another way, another place, another setting.
And look for someone vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if it really inspires someone who is a bully all of a sudden to have a change of heart. I think there has to be more consistent and intense work done with that child or teen to help figure out where their insecurities lie and why they're using this as a coping mechanism and provide them other strategies to handle.
Yeah, that makes sense. So at least hopefully it can plant a seed or at least that prep rally might get to at least one student, right? Which is better than nobody. So have you ever had any parents that were very defensive or, because I know parents love to think that their child or their teen can't do no wrong. They are perfect, right?
Yeah.
So have you ever had to speak with a family and get a really negative response? Or I'm trying to think of a good example here. Okay, because there are parents or aunts or uncles who have that mentality, like hit them first type thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of times being a caregiver or a counselor or a teacher, you want to come up with a solution to solve it in an equal manner, right? Not have a winner, so to speak. But then the parent is just kind of like, well, if you hit first, it's over. Or if you humiliate that person first, then it's over and done with. And besides that, my child can do no wrong. So have you ever struggled to get a parent, say, like maybe on the same level as you?
Parents are pretty receptive.
Okay.
I think we've kind of moved away from, an eye for an eye, or if, they hit you, you hit them back. We definitely still have parents that do get defensive about their child and that it was an accident or that it wasn't intended. And oftentimes in the classroom, we spend a lot of time with these kids every day and we can see their actions and whether something is intentional or not. I mean, I see it in my 3-year-old. I know the difference between an accident when she trips her sister and an intentional shove on the ground when she wants to get the toy from her. So there have been defensive parents. Now, whether they just give us kind of lip service while we're talking and then things change at home, but most of the time parents are pretty happy with the conclusion they come to. But again, it's about the consistent behavior that happens outside of that, both at home and in school, right? And in the class, we can do so much, but if that doesn't transfer to home, sometimes that kind of gets lost in the wash.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I wanted to talk about bullying because I just think it's it impacts so many people, and that sometimes it's not taken quite as seriously as I believe that it should be by some people. Do you have any advice for any parents out there? Like if, say, their child is the bullier or being bullied, how to...
Well, if their child is the bully...
like you were kind of saying, though, it could be due to an at-home situation.
Right. So if your child is bullying, it's important to take a step back and look at your own behaviors and interactions with your children at home, right?
And not to be like, oh, this is your fault.
No.
But just obviously there is some sort of issue that needs to be looked at. Yeah.
Absolutely. And recognize, like, why is your child feeling that this is how they need to cope? Is there another way? Are they not able to effectively communicate to you? Are you not actually sitting and listening to them, putting away your phone, turning off the TV, making eye contact with them and talking to them and truly listening to what they have to say?
Yeah.
And then if needed, doing some family counseling, right? Sometimes having a child psychologist is huge because they have, again, so much background in dealing with children. They watch their behaviors and actions and can tell you very quickly that it's a symptom of something else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If your child is being bullied, absolutely keep having that conversation.
Maybe some self-esteem builders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Self-esteem builders. And again, assure them that you don't have to be liked by everybody.
Yeah, it's okay
right?
to be disliked.
It is okay to be disliked. And you know what? If you have one or two good friends, stick with those friends and don't worry that, not everyone's going to be liked, because as an adult, there's lots of people that probably don't like me,
right.
and there's people I don't like either. But we still have to be respectful with each other, right? We can't undermine or demean somebody because we don't like them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one thing, if I could go back and say one of the things I would say to little me is not everybody has to like you. Like it's okay. And you don't have to fit in with these people. Because I know even looking back now, there was people, I would do things that were out of my comfort zone and that like made me sick to my stomach, uncomfortable, not in like a push my limits, like a good way, but just make me uncomfortable because I was trying so hard to be liked by certain people. And now I look back, I'm like, I would not do it the same. Yeah. But you're just so little, right? You just don't know any different.
No. And if you don't always have that support and nurturing at home to reassure you of that.
Yeah.
What else do you know?
Yeah. Right? I think my parents took the same approach as yours, just kind of like suck it up, deal with it, or go tell a teacher. Right. That was it. Right. They didn't want to hear anymore. Yeah. It's kind of like, you'll figure it out. It'll make you tough. Right. Well, yeah. No, it hurts. But I guess from there, I kind of want to segue into practicing mindfulness with children and starting at a young age. Because I know you have mentioned before, like to me in conversation we were having, I think it was one day you were at my house and I had a book for mindfulness that I was reading for myself. Yeah. And you said that was something that you practiced at school, which I thought was really neat. So how would you define mindfulness with children? Like, what is your definition?
It's simply, taking the time to sit and just be quiet and teach the children just to be quiet with their own thoughts. We practice some deep breathing. Again, of course, whether you're practicing with a 5-year-old or, a 15-year-old, it's going to differ. But it is just a way of helping them reduce or eliminate all that extraneous noise that we've created in our society and just be still with your thoughts, right? Yeah. And it's okay to be quiet and it's okay to be still, and we don't need the noise and the chaos around us all the time.
Just slow down.
Right, because it creates anxiety in everybody to be going all the time. And through a lot of the reading I've done, and we've talked about, a lot of schools are adopting mindfulness as a way of a discipline in some ways, instead of your old school, detentions or punishment in that way, because oftentimes a child is acting out because they're needing something. And to teach a child just to be still with him or herself and be calm and be reflective, there can be longer term outcomes, positive outcomes for that than a single punishment. Yeah,
it has a bigger influence. Like I was sent to detention in high school and I just thought it was silly, and me and my friends would sit there and joke around. Yeah. It wouldn't really solve anything. That whatever happened before was bound to happen again, whether it was being late to class for the 20th time. Right. And you don't take it quite so seriously, or if you're talking back to the teacher, there was usually a reason behind it, right? Yeah. And just sitting for an hour after school, missing that extracurricular activity did nothing but upset me. Right. It
created resentment and anger towards that teacher.
Yeah. So really that didn't solve much. So I'm happy to hear that that's an approach that is being taken more by other teachers and whatnot. That's exciting to me. So how long ago do you think that you started using this personally? And did you come up with it with other teachers? Were you just speaking among coworkers, or did you just kind of start to implement it yourself?
No, I have a friend of the family who is also a teacher, and she had been already using mindfulness 3-4 years ago already in her class. She kind of seemed like she was on the forefront of this approach. And so through that, there was an online course that I took, as well as just a little bit of reading, not enough reading, that I've used. And there's lots of books now, and there's lots of books that are dedicated for small children as well, on mindfulness as well, and just practicing things, even like yoga poses in the classroom. Like they love it. They think it's the funnest thing.
Right.
But, indirectly, you're hoping that they're getting something more out of it. So I know even
it's a place to start. Even just having a classroom of 5-year-olds doing yoga poses, I can just see it. That's so cute. I actually went to the library last week to look up books for mindfulness with children, try and get some info. And there was one book that had 25 or 26 people ahead of me on the list.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's so good. That means lots of people are interested in learning about it. I did take out one children's book to see what they offered, and they explain it in such a fun, easy way. Like even, I should have wrote down some of the practices. Maybe I'll write them in my blog, but one of them is talking about just putting yourself in your safe circle. So you close your eyes and you picture a white light emitting from your head and forming a bubble around you. And then in that bubble, you can sit with your thoughts. You can focus easily. You can I think it explains to be aware that you're angry. If your friend took your toy and you're mad at them, then you think about that, but you be calm and you focus on how you're going to talk to your friend in a nice way type thing. Yeah. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, did you have anything like that taught to you? Whether in school or by your parents?
No, not at all.
No, me neither.
It was quick consequences for everything, right? And on the other hand, I was we would say, the good kid. So I avoided trouble in every possible way.
Avoided conflict.
Super quiet, but it sometimes meant that I would remove myself entirely from social situations because I was afraid of getting in trouble. But no, the practice was never suggested to be still and be quiet with my thoughts. I think I sometimes did that already on my own.
Yeah. I definitely, I think at home I was lashing out often. I would pull that, I hate you, I don't love you anymore, just to try and get attention. Yeah. And I remember one time my mom reacting in the completely opposite way. Of course, I was acting out in a way that I wanted my mom, well, I guess my young mind at the time thought my mom would be like, oh no, why do you hate me? Why don't you love me? And then try to talk to me, but instead she just got upset with me, and I don't know if she told me that she hated me too, or just, I can't remember specifically, but it was a very heart-wrenching reaction that she had, and she just sent me away. Right. And I went bawling my eyes out to my room, and because at that age I didn't know how to say what I wanted, so I communicated by lashing out, and then in return I just got scolded for it and in trouble for it. Yeah. And I wish very much that mindfulness would have been something that was a part of my family. It would be very nice to have had that approach. So I know that's something I look forward to doing with my daughter. It's very important to me. And is that something you'll be doing with your girls? I'm assuming so, right?
Absolutely. They already have quite a few books in their literature. Again, they use animals often to portray how to be. I
never even thought of that.
To be mindful. And so those are things that we have started to read to them already. And so by the time they are old enough to fully understand, we're hoping that they will be able to use that practice. But again, as parents, we also have to be able to model that for them too, right?
Yes.
And keep her cool.
You have to practice what you preach.
And, redirect our behavior when we feel like we're losing our lid too. So
yes, because they are sponges. They soak up everything. Yeah. My daughter's only 1 and she's already mimicking everything. Yeah. Very much so. So what do you think is a good age to start practicing it with your children or in a classroom? Like, should preschoolers be doing it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that would be a good idea.
Like I said, my 3-year-old, the daycare she had been in prior and a day home, they both did yoga. They're even too, right? And they always have quiet time in the afternoon as well, where, some of the children still need naps and other ones are just required to sit quietly, and whether they read books or do puzzles, but there's no noise, there's no music.
And that's really tough for some kids.
Oh, it is super tough for some kids, right? Because they're used to being just surrounded by the buzz of noise all the time, whether it's having the TV on or the phone or the computer or, our noisy toys that we have in our home. So, I mean, reading to them as soon as you can. And then I would say, definitely preschool, 3, 4.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. I wasn't sure if that would be too young and I know as a caregiver myself, working in and out of school care and having a day home in the past, it can be difficult to find that balance when you do have a very active, very loud, very rambunctious child who it's almost easier to just let them run free in the backyard, but you still want to find that balance and give them the quiet time. You still want to insist that they try coloring or painting or reading a story with you. And I know from my own personal experience, I can be like, I just want you to go outside and kick that soccer ball around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, oh my goodness, my brain is frazzled right now.
And when you're a parent that has been working all day and you come home and your child is bouncing off the walls, it is, challenging to have them sit and just be still, even if it's for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's about making those habits and making a practice. And I know recently in our house, we've had to also talk about our bad behaviors that we've already implemented as parents, and we don't turn the TV on when the girls come home from day home. Yeah. And that was, for me, was always a habit. I turn the TV on and I flip the channels and wait for the news to come on. And now I just don't at all. And the girls get a limited amount of screen time, sometimes before I'm making dinner, and that's it. So
yeah. That's good. I know I even caught, because Elizabeth has been too young to even pay attention to cartoons. And sometimes I would just have it on in the background if I was cooking or cleaning. And then now I've started to notice she's really interested in what's on the TV. So I have changed it to, I only put cartoons on when we first wake up at 5 in the morning. While I'm making breakfast and coffee and whatnot, I will let her watch, say, Sesame Street for 20 minutes. And then I will play with her. And then same thing, right after her bath before bed, she watches about 20 minutes. And it's always something that is a learning show or that has music, just so she can bop around and be entertained. Yeah. But during the day, it is just the radio.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, Justin and I have kind of briefly talked about technology with children because it is everywhere. Yes. And obviously, with you being a teacher, you know that they start now with iPads at, like, what is it, kindergarten now?
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. So what are your thoughts? I guess I want to ask your thoughts about in the classroom, but also let's start with personally at home. What, like, do your girls, do they have an iPad?
Oh gosh, no.
No, I didn't think so.
They don't have iPads. And I have made the mistake of letting my older one have too much screen time, sometimes unknowingly, and other times, out of desperation,
you need a break
watch
or whatnot.
TV, right? But, all of the studies from the Canadian Pediatrics Association is telling us that too much screen time has had a negative impact on all of our children. I mean, I have students who are in grade 6 and 7 that have been diagnosed with gaming addictions. These are 12 and 13-year-olds. So it virtually means from the time they leave school till the time that they are forced to go to bed, they are doing nothing but sitting on their gaming console.
Yeah, there are some that are like that. Yeah. And it's true. People at all ages now have become addicted to that. I think for years they have. It was more so, I thought, with adults, and now it's just kind of making its way down the ladder and hitting the younger generations.
Yeah. And we're seeing it, right? Our children don't know how to communicate with each other. They don't know how to regulate their emotions because so many of them are simply sitting in front of a screen, whether it is on an iPad or the television. And don't get me wrong, it's inevitable that all children will have exposure to some type of screen time.
Yes, of course.
But you do have to be super vigilant about how much is permissible, and there needs to be a balance right? Like Talia knows what an iPad is, and we have a couple educational games downloaded on the iPad. And when we've gone for a long road trip, for instance, we'll take the iPad and she'll get to play on it for 15, 20 minutes, and then it goes away, right, for the rest of the trip.
Yeah, it's not the whole drive.
Once
right?
we get to our destination, she does not play on that iPad anymore, right?
It's strictly for part of the car ride.
Yeah, absolutely. But she doesn't ask for it, you know, it's a treat for her and a surprise when we do bring it out. So
it's not expected.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to sometimes think that I wish I could just take Elizabeth and go live in a bush somewhere.
Yeah.
keep her away from everything. But then I am 100% guilty too of her hanging off my leg while I'm trying to prep her lunch for the next day and cook dinner. And I'm like, oh my goodness, go watch Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Or like rewinding Sesame Street
Yeah.
so she can finish watching it because it's the only show she does like, and I hadn't finished dinner quickly enough. So I can't say like I'm one of those parents that is anti-technology and don't let your little ones use screen time. But I had mentioned to Justin in a previous episode that Elizabeth is already aware that if she moves her hand on my phone, that it moves the screen.
Yes.
And now if I put my cell phone down anywhere, she is after the thing.
Absolutely.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
And actually I was at a conference on the weekend, and there was another little one walking around. She was 1 or 2, and she's seen my cell phone sitting in Elizabeth's stroller. And she was like booking it away from her mom's, walking over trying to get my phone. And her mom's like, oh, of course, her and cell phones. I'm like, so it's not just mine, hey?
No.
I couldn't believe it.
No, we have the same problem in our house. The cell phone and the remote.
And I think
those girls know that they're like a coveted possession, and they understand that they hold some value to mom and dad. So it must be important to have them in your hands.
I know. And then I feel guilty. I realize that's my fault because she sees me on my phone.
Yeah.
And she sees me with that remote, and she knows now that it controls the TV because she will take the remote as well and look at the TV and wonder why nothing's happening. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she sees me on my phone too much. So as much as I try to not be on my phone around her, there are sometimes it's just, I can't help it, especially if we're doing stuff for the podcast and I'm doing posts for social media or checking emails. She sees me on my phone and she wants to take it and see what's so exciting, right? Yeah. And I hate that it takes my attention away from her. So I have been kind of working out a routine and schedule of when to be on my phone and when to have it completely out of sight.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like that's important.
Yes, for sure.
And it kind of going back to how you were saying how teenagers some don't know how to communicate. Like even the way when you were a teenager or when I was a teenager, we used to call people. We used to call people's house phones to talk to them, right? And I know even friends that I have now, even though that was something we did as teenagers, they to this day, they can't stand picking up their phone and calling somebody. Like their conversation has to be done over text message. I still like it old school. I would almost rather talk on the phone. Yeah. I'd prefer it, but that is hard to find. And now just the teenagers nowadays, I can't imagine them wanting to hold a conversation over a telephone.
Yeah.
Like I've seen tables of teenagers in restaurants texting and not talking amongst each other.
Absolutely.
And that's crazy. That used to be my favorite thing to do with friends, is go for breakfast and of course being girls, we would all sit around and gossip and chit chat and talk about clothes or whatever it was that we were talking about. But we would maybe check our phone once or twice. I don't think we were glued to it the way that I notice some people are now.
Yeah. And when you're texting, you lose the tone, right?
Yeah, there's no emotion.
When you're talking.
Unless you throw an emoji in there.
Absolutely. But even that, right? And so that empathy, we're seeing that kids don't understand empathy because they're not connecting in a way that they are learning that the tone of your voice, the speed of your language, all of those things.
Even body language.
Have an important role in how someone feels, right? Yeah. And you don't see that in text messaging.
Yeah, you can interpret it however you like.
Exactly.
And it could be a good outcome or a bad outcome, I guess, depending. So I think you actually answered most of my questions that I wanted to ask about that. But do you find that it is struggle trying to practice, this is going back to mindfulness, this is a question I just forgot to ask, but do you find it is more of a struggle with your own children or with children that aren't your own, like for example at school? Like,
by far my own children.
Yeah, that's usually the way it works, right?
Before having children, I had 15, 16 years of experience. I had been a nanny and a caregiver for many years. I thought I had it made. And your own children, oh man, they just help you see things in a whole different light. So yeah, most definitely. Just recently I went to a child psychology conference a couple weekends ago because I'm struggling at home with my parenting, especially with the 3-year-old. And I'm seeing the behaviors I remember seeing from my own mother that I didn't like.
Right,
and
that you swore you would never do.
Yeah, in myself. But I'm also seeing it manifest in my daughter in a form of anxiety.
Okay.
And so I am feeling terribly guilty now about my behaviors of yelling and threat and intimidation that have likely created this anxiety. And I had to take a step back, and there were lots of tears, but and reevaluate and talk with my husband about the things that we need to do. And that was reducing and almost eliminating screen time, and me being far more cognizant about how much I'm on my phone, because she sees that as whatever's on my phone is more valuable than time with her. Okay, she's old enough to start understanding that, right? But definitely your own children, it's a whole different animal than at school. You can throw anything at me at work and I keep my cool. And I seem to have the answer. I know where to get the answers, but it's just not like that at home.
Yeah, I appreciate, I admire that you are very self-aware and that you are willing to say, I did this and this and this wrong in your eyes, and then look for a solution that is from somebody else to offer to you. Because some people don't want to do that. Some people are uncomfortable doing that.
Most people, when I go back into my classrooms and I see my students, I look at, I would say at least half of them have parents that are reactive parents, right? Like I was doing, right? And living virtually day to day and just counting the minutes for my husband to get home because I had enough with them. And I said, this isn't how I wanted parenting to be. And parenting is not by far rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. But, I waited a long time to have kids, and here I was exasperated and angry and frustrated every day and thought this isn't how it should be. And my daughters are getting the short end of the stick because I don't know how to regulate my own emotions or have other alternatives. So,
yeah. And I know just from working in and out of school care and then the short while that I had my day home, I can agree. I can relate that it is easier with other people's children. I mean, I'm only 1 year into being a mom, but even with her naps and stuff, I think to myself, how come this was never a problem with any other child I took care of but my own? And yet, same thing, I could keep my cool and hold my composure and be quick on my feet and have answers when it came to other people's children or at the school. And then, with Elizabeth, I catch myself all the time thinking, take a deep breath. I am the same way. I have been a reactionary person for a huge part of my life. And now that I am a mom, I very much do not want to take that reactionary side of me into the years ahead, because I don't want Elizabeth to adopt that as well. So kind of like what you were saying, what you noticed with your oldest, I'm glad that you spoke up about that, because it kind of makes me feel not so bad. I know there's so many of us moms out there that we have reactionary moments. It's kind of inevitable. Yeah. But then I have a feeling most of us always feel guilty afterwards as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We just can't help it.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately we sit there and beat ourselves up about it.
Yes.
So, I can only imagine what it'll be like in the teenage years. Okay, well, how about we switch it up a little bit and we talk about your MS?
Sure.
So you well, first of all, let's tell everybody, because there's probably quite a few listeners that aren't sure what multiple sclerosis is. So would you like to break it down?
Sure. Multiple sclerosis is what is diagnosed as having the immune system attacking any part of your nervous system, and it attacks the myelin sheath. That's the protective coating around the nerve. So it can happen anywhere in the body. When people experience tingling and numbness, it could be in their hands and their legs and their feet. It can also cause what I had was I had optic neuritis. So it attacked my optic nerve in my left eye.
Oh, okay.
And essentially I lost my vision completely in my left eye. It started and probably took about a week completely for my vision loss. So
that's pretty quick.
Yeah, it was really quick. And I was absolutely clueless
Yeah.
to what it was. We don't have any MS in our family. I really didn't suspect that. I had really bad migraine headaches to start, which is very unusual for me too. So when I first approached my GP, my GP, that was her suggestion, that maybe my vision loss is a result of a migraine headache. But when she looked further into it, I saw an optometrist and then an ophthalmologist and then a neurologist. And within a period of about 5 days, it went from symptoms to diagnosis. So in that case, I was very fortunate because there are people that live with MS for months or even years that never have a diagnosis. And having nothing is worse than having something because all of us, of course, go to Dr. Google to find out what these symptoms could possibly be.
Think worst case scenario.
Absolutely.
Usually.
And optic neuritis is a symptom. It could be of a brain tumor. It could be a stroke. It could be MS. It could be any of several things. And so ultimately my vision has come back 100%. It did take a little bit over a month. So for that month I couldn't drive. I had, that was a real problem. I couldn't drive, and
it's crazy how I just want to mention here how driving is something that you take for granted when you've done it for a long time. Yeah, because I went for a stretch of I think 7 months maybe of not having a vehicle, and it wasn't a big deal. I had adapted, and then once I had a new car and I was driving for even just a couple of months, the thought I think something happened. I couldn't drive my vehicle for a day or two. And I was like, what am I going to do without a car?
Yeah, we're so dependent on it.
Yeah, it's crazy how a year ago it was fine. And then all of a sudden I just can't imagine not having the luxury of jumping into a vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyways, so sorry, you couldn't drive for some time there.
So for a month or so, it took several months for the optic neuritis to completely clear up, but it was about a month before I could go back to driving. And thankfully, since that initial symptom, I haven't had a flare up or a relapse. Sometimes they call it as well. So it'll be 2 years in July since I've had my diagnosis, and thankfully I've been healthy and happy, aside from fatigue, which is a very common symptom of MS. And a lot of people, unfortunately, find that the fatigue becomes so unbearable, they can't do their day-to-day activities. So many people have to leave their jobs completely and often have to depend on other people to get them through the day. So
yeah, I do know one other lady who has MS, and I think hers progressed maybe not quite as quickly as yours, but hers was more of a full body. Like she, at one point she needed help bathing herself, and then she was walking with a cane or a walker, and then she was fine. I'm not sure where she's at right now. I have spoken with her recently. I just haven't gotten details on her condition, but hers, I just know it came out of nowhere, kind of like yours, right? No warning. And then it just completely affected her mobility and like you said, day-to-day life with more than just fatigue. And she has never fully recovered from that. Wow. So I guess you're right. You are very fortunate that it was just with your eye. And did you have any sort of function issues with your legs, your arms, any of your motor skills?
I have not, thankfully.
Okay, yeah.
It only seemed to attack the optic nerve. But yeah, I have been at different conferences, and my first cousin was diagnosed also with MS about 9 months after I was diagnosed as well.
And you guys are the first in the family?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And hers was the numbness and the tingling in her legs.
Mm-hmm.
And she has actually had 1, possibly 2 flare-ups since her initial diagnosis. So hers seems to be definitely more active than mine is. Again, I'm in, and so she is remitting, relapsing, because there's 4 different stages for MS.
Okay.
And so most cases are stage 1, remitting, relapsing.
Right.
Stage 2 is progressive, and that's where we see people who lose their mobility and often need a cane or wheelchair. Now there have been cases of people being able to go back to phase 1.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
There are medications available, but those medications simply manage the symptoms. They're not necessarily getting to the MS, because we still don't know what is the root or the trigger to MS.
Yeah,
itself.
so there's no cure, no treatment. There's only managing it, right?
Yeah.
And are you on medication for yours? How do you
I'm not.
manage it?
No, I've chosen not to.
But there are options.
There are options.
Okay.
Yeah, there are options. Some of them are oral, and some of them require an injection.
Oh, okay.
Some are daily, some are weekly.
And in your case, what would those be to help or
what they help
or prevent,
or what they prevent exactly is the chance of a flare-up sooner than possibly expected.
Oh, okay.
But the problem is, because everyone's case is so different, you don't know if your next flare-up will be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Or 3 weeks.
So, right. And so taking the medication, you don't know, is it guaranteeing you 5 years rather than 4 years? Right. So, I mean, people that are in a much more progressive state or finding that it's impacting their day-to-day life, I think often will use it, but there are huge side effects to the medications as well.
Is there? Okay.
So you kind of have to weigh out whether or not the risks of taking the medications outweigh the impact that the symptoms are having on your day-to-day life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess like you're saying, if somebody has a more aggressive, more severe case, and I know for me personally, I would be way more interested in looking at what sort of medications can help prevent any further regression, I guess.
Yeah.
So for you personally, how has it affected your career?
It hasn't infected my career a whole lot. I'm fortunate that my place of employment has reduced the number of hours that I work to support me being able to continue with them long term. Right. Because
isn't stress it's a contributing factor.
Stress is huge. Yeah. So my employer understands that, being a teacher is a highly stressful job. Yeah. And so reducing my role, the number of hours, that's their part. Now, how I reduce my stress at home and in my personal life is up to me. Right. But that has been super helpful because I love my job. I feel valued when I go to work. Yeah, and to me, awesome. Not working at all, I think would actually affect my mental health negatively and not benefit me. Absolutely. Having MS,
that makes sense. Yeah. Almost put you in a depressed state.
Right. Yeah.
I know for me it would, right? Just feeling like you're having that all stripped from you, especially for someone who's been teaching for 20 years. Suddenly, I couldn't imagine how difficult that would be for you suddenly not being able to.
Yeah.
My goodness. So on your personal time, what are some ways that have helped you manage even just because fatigue is a big one for you, right?
Yeah.
So what helps you de-stress and maybe feel more rested?
Definitely.
Or are those the two main things that you focus on?
Sleep is huge. Yeah. As much as I can,
With
having a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old,
yeah.
Trying to get 8 to 9 hours of sleep uninterrupted every night is a rarity, but that is definitely what I aim for. some light exercise. I'm not huge intense, but going for a walk a couple times a week and doing yoga a couple times a week, which have been helpful. I've changed my eating habits as well. And talking to other people, definitely, who also share the disease.
Yeah.
But again, talking to people who are like-minded, because we have, there are people that are in their 20s, like my cousin, and she's a totally different stage of her life than I am. She doesn't have children. She's not married. So
your struggles are different.
Right. So that has been helpful as well. So, and seeking the help even of a therapist on my own time as well, just to deal with managing life.
Right. Yeah, just life in general. I love that we're promoting here. You very much are promoting here. There's nothing wrong with therapists.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. How did your husband handle the news? Like, how was he affected by it? Because it must have impacted him in some way.
Yeah, it did. He's a warrior.
Yeah.
He's definitely been my rock. He immediately jumped into doing lots of research, and he is a podcast lover. He's always listening to podcasts, coming home to me with new things to listen to.
Oh, nice.
To the point where it was overwhelming, and I had to tell him, enough. And he was kind of taken back because he was doing his best to help. But so he has been 100% supportive of everything that I've needed to do, and when I need extra help, and when he sees that sometimes, I'm having a really rough day because it's been hard dealing with our kids, and I'm extremely tired, and the house is a mess, and things just suck in that moment.
Yeah.
He's been really good with always like keeping us cool and reassuring me that he's here to stick it out for the long run.
Oh, that's fantastic. Aw. Do you have any fears about it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
My biggest fear is that my health will decline rapidly and that my daughters will see me suffer. That's my biggest fear.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with them seeing mom struggle and having a mom that might need extra support or extra time. And I hope I don't have to be in a wheelchair by the time they're old enough to fully understand. I don't want to have to ever depend on them. At the same time, teaching a child also to have empathy and understand what it means to care for somebody that has a disability or that has special needs is not a terrible lesson.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. So there's benefits and negatives, you think, to them potentially having to see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, this kind of reminds me, I'm going to tell all the listeners about when I first had my daughter and you had just had your second. And I don't know if you're open to talking about Talia's surgery.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you can explain the surgery in a moment, but I'll just quickly say this. Talia had her surgery that had her in this very large cast. And plus you had a newborn baby and you're dealing with your MS. And you came over to my house and you're packing these two little ones. Like I said, the one who had just had surgery. And I was looking at you thinking, she is like Wonder Woman. It was because obviously a brand new baby is challenging in itself. I think I was still stuck in my love bubble because it's my first brand new baby. But then I was looking at you. I think it took 3 trips for you to even get yourself and your children and all this stuff into my house. And I was just watching you and you were so happy and still smiling. And just, you seem like you were not, well, obviously you must have been phased in some bit, but you did not let it affect your day to the extreme of showing it to others, if that was the case. Like I was just, and I know because you did confide in me and you did tell me how you were affected by everything. And of course you were overwhelmed at times, but I just remember pure admiration looking at you. I'm like, how did she do it? Like you deserve a medal.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So just some final thoughts that I have here. like MS aside, just in general, what do you do for yourself to almost de-stress from being a mom? Because this is Mom's Month. We're talking all sorts of motherly stuff, and being a mom is overwhelming. Being a parent is overwhelming, but we're just kind of focusing on the women this month. And what do you do for you?
For me, I think
just to take a break from
some of the best therapy I have is getting together with friends and just, having a meal that's, intended to be an hour, hour and a half. And you look at your phone and it's been 4 hours and all you've done is talk and laugh and the time gets away from you. Like I always feel rejuvenated. My husband always mentions when I come home I'm energetic and
glowing.
I'm talking and I'm like, yeah, it's so important to have that, right? Like
it is.
Going for a walk, yes, and having a massage is nice too for people who can afford it. Yeah. But having just that time to talk with other women and just share everything. And it might be work related. It might be, your child stories, but that definitely helps for sure. I'd say that was my number one way of de-stressing and removing myself from that mom element for a couple hours.
It is definitely necessary. Yes. It is. I feel like as moms, we can go crazy if we don't. And then, like you said, you come back rejuvenated.
Yes.
Then do you feel like you're a better mom, a better wife?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can forget that, right? Yeah. Or feel too obligated almost to stay with their family.
Yes.
But okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming today. I love you had so much good advice, and I hope the listeners appreciate this episode as much as I do. So for all you listeners, please subscribe and share it to all of your friends. You can find the after show blog on www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com. And we are going to talk about all our social media platforms. My Instagram is Chelsey_Life on Life's Terms. My Twitter is very simple. It is Chelsey Kapler. And don't forget Life on Life's Terms Facebook page. It is Life on Life's Terms podcast. And I think that sums it up. If you want to find any of Justin's, you'll find him on my pages anyways. And if you want to get in touch with Angela, reach out to me. Otherwise, you enjoy your day. Goodbye, everyone.